to pass a resolution, please.
Okay, we've currently got 16 members with Apiata's present absence, and so 13 would be required to achieve 80%, which is 3 who could vote against a resolution. If Apiata returns, here he comes, then we move to 17, but it's 14 then required, so again 3 could vote against.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to speak for myself, but I know that the Tangata Whenua reps all want to speak for themselves as well. I think Tangata Whenua brought a proposal today, and it's very disappointing that actually it was rejected outright. Thank you, Paul, for at least supporting that proposal. I, for one, don't support this resolution as it's currently drafted, with the actual and reasonable test being used in this way to set the limit, for want of a better word. So I don't support this resolution in principle at all. And I'll leave it to my colleagues to voice their views.
Do you want other people to?
I know they want to.
Any other speakers?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'll be voting against the motion when it's put, Mr. Chairman, and the committee. And that's mainly on that enhancement. You want to enhance the Karamu? Nobody's come and talked to the Settlement Trust. Nobody. We haven't had a peep. We've had to try and figure it out of what's going on. You're going to privatise the water in private land, in a private setup as it is now. Well, that's the intention, Glazebrookes, and then let it down the stream. Now the stream that needs to be corrected, I'll get onto it now. The Karamu in our Deed of Settlement Act is a stream, it's not a river. There's a huge difference between the stream and the river. So we need that actually looked at before we even can get back into this. As far as the Karamu is concerned, it doesn't begin in Pokawa. And I don't know where you got that idea from. The Karamu goes down the old bed of the Ngauriroro. It's part of the Heretaunga block. So it's just another boot in a place that we won't talk about. So it is the enhancement of rivers. Karamu and the Twyford, the Raupare, are the only two that we see here, but that gets Portrue the Mill, the Twyford, it's springs, massive springs running riot, discharging to sea. And you've got to put in a pump to lift water out of an aquifer where we're short of it. Not on. So I'm sorry, I have to vote against it. Some of these need looking at. Some of the things I've spoken about need looking at. And it's almost an insult, really, that it's got to this level with nobody coming to talk. So, kia ora.
I'm sorry, I just forgot to mention, we said, and I said this earlier this afternoon, that this process has been very frustrating, and we think that there's now merit, and I think that there is merit in getting this out to the public, but I don't support what we've got that we would be proposing to put to the public. So I just want to be clear on that. I think it's time to stop going around the houses here, but completely unhappy with where we've landed.
Okay.
Kia ora, yes, I'm going to support this motion simply because I like to see it go ahead, and maybe we can have some discussions later on the merits of what's been put up there today.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. So this has been a really interesting conversation to participate in today. Over the last year and a half to 2 years that I've had the privilege of participating with this committee, I have been impressed by the range and scope of work that our staff have conducted. And over that time, I've come to assign a level of confidence to that work. Today, however, I find that as I look at, for example, our groundwater modelling, our tank plan, I find through our conversation today that at one point we started with good science that we could have confidence in, but by the end of today I find that we don't have confidence in that science anymore, and we're not entirely sure what the science measurement is. Tangata whenua have often been labelled as the difficult whānau member with regards to tank and trying to get this to a state of notification. My understanding is that tangata whenua have been proactive, clear, concise, and very articulate in their concerns and their values and where they would like to see that this plan contributes to the well-being of the management of water within our catchments. Today, however, I find that I'm sitting here as a tangata whenua representative. We've tried to look at that science which has been provided to us and to be genuine in our efforts to provide some balance and ensure that our values are represented accurately and that this plan is as robust as possible. But my observation has been that actually Māori have been continually obstructed in minor ways throughout this process, and we get here now to a point where we need to notify this plan. And we're sitting here with a will to try and work together, and I was disappointed that the last motion didn't succeed, mostly because I thought I understood the science before me, but secondly because we were informed that the submission process is an honourable way in which to ensure that those mechanisms or voices are heard in the next stage of this plan. So when that same opportunity was offered to this council, where we said, okay, fine, let's reverse that, let's be conservative, let's try and put in place some measurements that would at least mitigate the unknown factors, and that we could deal with that in submissions. When the opportunity was reversed, unanimously this council decided no. Now that may or may not be connected to the fact that they would leave our community to follow through the submissions process, but as iwi, we have found the submission processes to be less than effective historically. So we understand that frustration and we understand those limits. So we had hoped that this would be a genuine conversation around finding equitable compromise in order to notify this plan. I am seriously concerned around what has been indicated in our conversations today, but we are 4 to 6 years down the track and we need to put this out into the public space.
Yeah.
Despite the limitations I've expressed, the best option is for us to trust in that very same submission process and hope that the shortcomings that I see and that others see, our public will see. So while I am in principle against this motion, I will be voting for it.
Yeah, I'll be voting against it, principally because when I first came on here, iwi reps had to go through a submission process, and it was trust in the process. It cost them dearly to follow that process through, and they won it. But I can't vote for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In looking at this notification process, I look back and I particularly look at that 3-page document which summarises how Māori values and interests are reflected in the tank plan change. And I can really see that tangata whenua have had an enormous influence on the tank plan process. We can go through issue by issue, objective by objective, he wai, he taonga, valuing the water, Te Mana Te Tiwai, Objective 6, Objective 7, Objective 8, right through Māori ecosystem health and contamination, Māori ecosystem health, water flow and levels, meeting the needs and value of the... It just goes on and on, where tangata whenua have had a really, probably the biggest influence on any planning document that this council's ever produced. I'm in my experience over nearly 20 years on around the council table, this has been the most influential Māori tangata whenua connection to a plan change, and the results are outstanding. What we're getting down to, by the looks of it, is a consideration of the management and allocation of groundwater and the method by which we're looking to achieve that. And what we've got now, it appears, is that this miraculous number, called 80 in this case, or could be 90, is weighed up against a fair and reasonable measure for that process. A limited 10-year process where we come to understand the aquifer much, much more clearly, and in the meantime we're managing this water allocation downward. It's a whole package to do so, and what concerns me is that there appears to be advice given which is poor advice, poorly thought through, defies logic, and the expectation is somehow we pluck 80 out of the air because it's lower than 90 is about the extent of the rationale. Simply not good enough. And those planners that have promoted that need to think carefully about their position, their advice. Has it become more of a political advice as opposed to based on the logic? And that's my concern, that we're arrived at a point where an exceptional plan is on the table, an exceptional plan highly influenced by tangata whenua, who've had a tremendous degree of input, is now at a point where, for the sake of one dubious metric, that becomes compromised. And my concern is that this committee will suffer as a result of that situation. And I urge those tangata whenua members who have expressed a view on this to think about that, that there are opportunities not only in this process but over the next 10 years of the life of the RPC to continue to influence the outcome, to achieve the result you want to achieve in a constructive way that actually gets you to the end where we ought to be. There's no limit to the level of consensus on wanting to achieve the water quality we all strive for, none whatsoever. This whole committee, 100% of it, is behind that goal. The staff are behind that goal and have constructed and worked with tangata whenua in an extraordinary way, developing, shaping, pushing the plan, poking the plan to meet those very legitimate and valid concerns of tangata whenua. In my view, the best I've seen, and I just wonder whether we ought to let the process go, get it out there, come back and argue the issues on another day as well. But I'll be supporting the plan for those reasons, because it's a good plan, the best plan we can do in the current circumstances.
Mr Chair, I just want to make a point of order here. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but I don't think it's appropriate for any person in this committee to cast aspersions on the quality of a professional planner's advice to tangata whenua. I do not think that's appropriate. And what's more, comments that he may have some other agenda, be it political, is also completely inappropriate, and I think the member should apologise for making those comments. Criticise the arguments put forward, disagree with the arguments put forward, but don't cast aspersions on the quality of the advice or the person themselves. I think it's unacceptable.
Thank you, Tania. Neil can decide whether he apologises with it or not. I wouldn't instruct him because this often happens to our staff from Tāngata Whenua who criticise our
Look,
staff.
I am not going to get into that. I am pointing out something that's just
well,
happened.
I'm just saying there is some...
So you think that's an
close-
appropriate
No,
thing
I
to
do
do?
not think it's
okay, so
appropriate.
can we deal, Mr. Chair, with what I've just commented on? I'm not going back, peddling back hui or pointing fingers at other people. I am simply pointing out for everybody and for the record here that someone that is not at this table and unable to defend themselves has been maligned, and I think it's inappropriate. That's not what we're about.
I'm just pointing out some consistency. Neil, what do you want to do?
I can see poor advice from a mile off.
Sorry?
I know when I have seen poor advice, and I'll say so when I see it.
Mr. Chairman, let's progress. We're going backwards.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of my constituents, Māori have had the wool pulled over their eyes since they first let the sheep out of the Endeavour, 1840, and I just feel compelled when I hear the likes of Nikki pleading that this is not the way we're going. However, we need to get this on the table, and I will be supporting the motion despite my apprehensions.
Other speakers? Firstly,
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Reluctantly, I will be supporting the motion, but that's only because there are some things that we as Tāngata Whenua are entrusted with from our people, which is one, how we look after our taonga. And some of the stuff in this plan here is not giving it preservation for the next generations to come. And it's been highlighted throughout. And what Api has said is correct. So I think, reluctantly, I have to support the motion because we want to get the plan out there to the people, because at the end of the day, they have to have their say around whether this is right for them or not. But, I need to reluctantly put that there. Thank you.
thank you, John. Who was... Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to echo the comments by Councillor Bevan and Councillor Belford, and pass my thanks on to the Tank Group for the work that has been going on for a number of years around this. I think having a process like Tank is a great way to proceed these sorts of processes, because at the end of the day, even though there may be some disagreements on one or 2 points at the end of it, the community is mostly in agreement with the good stuff that is in the plan. So I think that's a real positive. We've just got to get this last particular issue sorted out. So there is an awful lot of good in this plan change, which I'd truly like to support. But I'm also here. I very much happy. Thank you for your dissertation. That. Why is it the Tāngata Whenua always seem to be the ones that have to concede? I think, we're continually telling them we can go to the next process, you can go to make submissions on stuff if you disagree with it. Why are we not looking at doing the other way around and saying, well, okay, let's concede this particular issue, and if you want to go to just having a fair and reasonable limit, then make submissions on that in a similar way that you're asking Tāngata Whenua to do so. Neil, I kind of get your point about the 80 number being a little bit up in the air, but everything's been modelled. There's a lot of models involved in this particular plan, including how to work out fair and reasonable. That's all based on modelling as well, and models are only as good as the mathematics behind it, and also the information they have to test the models for correctness and improvement and accuracy. So I find that argument a little bit spurious. But in saying that, the staff have recommended or have suggested in the past that a 90 million cube number could be defendable. So I'm still keen to see something along those lines. But I'm also hearing, and I also agree, and I said previously, that I do want to see this go out to the public. I do want to see something on the table that they can get their teeth into. So at this particular point in time, I'm happy to support the motion.
Debbie, is it?
Thank you.
I would like to acknowledge all of the members of the RPC. It's a great sign of the maturing of this committee that actually everybody is speaking today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to walk in all of your shoes and see where we've got to. I'd like to acknowledge the staff because you guys, you've been on this journey for a very long time, and look, I can see it in your faces. The fact that we're this close is going to be a huge gratification to you, I'm sure. I'd like to acknowledge the stakeholder group, and when I first became involved in the tank process, my goal was to protect the integrity of the stakeholders who have given up the 6 years, 5 or 6 years of their time to be committing to community outcomes. And along that journey, I've learnt a lot about tangata whenua engagement. So my observation is that the magic happens when you walk in each other's shoes, whether it's in a stakeholder process or a committee or around the council table. The perfect stakeholder process is not when all parties go away a little bit unsatisfied. That's not to say anyone's right or wrong, but we've all shared our sentiments along the way, and that's incredibly important. So the fact that we've just about got this tank plan change to be notified is a tremendous endorsement on the work today, and I'd be very proud to walk away from this council and know that it is given its wings and set to fly and see what happens from here. So thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Any other speakers?
Yeah, Claudia. You spoken? I've done it.
I'm not going to speak because I'm conscious of time. And I'd like to see you put the vote at the earliest possible stage it could while you've got a quorum.
And I'd like to speak.
Sure.
So, like Debbie, I want to thank everybody for their input into this, and the fact that maybe we differ in opinion. I don't actually see it as a bad thing, you know. But I'm on this board as a governor, and as a governor I like to promote good practice. When I see that I'm furnished with bad data, and I don't blame the staff for that, when I see that we still operate in frameworks that don't measure the outcomes, I have to take care about what I support. So, you know, if Councillor Curtin, he raised this thing about this document here, about all these tangata whenua things that are mentioned, but not one of them's got a value on it. How do you measure it? I recall a meeting we had here, and everyone was asked, what do you understand about Te Mana o Te Wai? Only one councillor understood it. So no point in putting these Māori words in documents if nobody understands it. And the other thing is, there's no point in putting them in here if there's no measure in terms of how mātauranga Māori may be accommodated. How do we consider the Māori of something? How do we consider how someone who's living in poverty is going to get his kaimona? All those sorts of things. So, you know, I look at this from my own point of view, and I would like to see progress. But for me, you know, I'm into the long-term game, and I want things to be right. So I don't care if it takes another 5 years. Let's get the process right. So I'll be voting against it.
Done. That's 4.
Any other speakers?
Chair, sorry.
I'll just finish it off. Everyone's done huge effort into this. Staff, people at Tank, as I said before, I went occasionally and sat there. It was really grinding stuff, and they sat there all day, and they got through it. And as a community group, I think they did a fantastic job. And lots of people did a lot of work here, and there's been a huge amount of compromise, and I point that to you, Paul. Second time I pointed something to you today. The irrigators have compromised hugely here, hugely. This is the first time in the history of New Zealand that irrigators agreed to a ban on future consents. And I was stunned when they did that, but they did. They have had a great encouragement to make this happen. And I speak to them on a regular basis. They have compromised enormously. To say that Tangata Whenua are the only ones who have compromised is just ridiculous. Didn't you hear what Tom just said? The huge gains that we have made in this. This is huge gains for Hiratonga. And I go back to that again. The people of Hiratonga are relying on us to come up with a plan change that will keep them in their jobs and clean their rivers up. And this is the closest you're going to get to that. And I know, Tangata Whenua, we're down to a figure. And I know you want the figure as a last compromise, but I just don't think it's needed. It's not based on science, either of those numbers. So why would we go to something that puts the whole thing at risk? So having the open book, not open book, that's the wrong thing, but having it open and so that we find that number when we get all the telemetry up and we know exactly, and it shouldn't be too hard for us to do that, then we can start understanding the situation a lot better. So I will be supporting it. So Alan, I think that's the last bit. Back to you.
Well, I'll be very brief, Mr. Chairman. This plan change is the most significant that this council, or in fact, probably most regional councils have contemplated. People have worked really hard. People have been prepared to compromise, and that takes, you know, a lot of bravery to do that. And I hope it can be supported. Unlike the Deputy Chair, well, my particular position and stage of life is such that I wouldn't spend another 5 years trying to make, to achieve a significant step along the way, because life's too short. So I actually encourage people to compromise further and support this motion.
Thank you, Alan. Before we vote, James would just like to have a final word, and I think he deserves that. So.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just want to raise a process issue, really, and it's got two parts to it. The first of which is that when the Tangata Whenua amendment to the motion was put forward, there were two elements to that which I don't think were controversial. So one of those related to ruling out the stream flow enhancement issue, and the others was some additional wording into the Section 32 report. So it's not clear to me that the committee actually had any objection to those matters. Secondarily, what I'm hearing is that of the issues that are listed up on there, particularly all those that are in the table, which actually is Table A, and it's issues 1 to 10, it's only 5B which is of concern. So what I'm wondering is whether the committee might like to approach the vote on this in a way which would enable everything to be adopted except for those matters which are of contention, which would include those two provisions that Tangata Whenua put forward, and then to separately consider the question of 5B, which is to have no numeric limit. And I particularly raise that because I've heard two different arguments. One is that there needs to be a numeric limit, and then the other is that it should be 80 as opposed to 90. If there may be a majority of the committee that's prepared to support 90 million cubic metres, so that there is still a numeric limit, but it's not 80, which might be a halfway house between no numeric limit and 80, and the committee might be able to achieve consensus on that. So if that is the case, then it would be worth taking the votes in a manner which would enable a landing point today. And I'm just concerned if we take this kind of just all at once, then it's kind of a do or die really on today's decisions.
You're saying take everything but 1, 2.
I'm saying particularly because of 2.1 being adopting the plan change, you might want to take that separately. So take 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3 except for 5B in 1.2, so we probably amend 1.2 to be all those matters except 5B. So first of all, see whether we can adopt all of those non-contentious issues, and possibly we could add in those 2 matters that have been tabled by Tangata Whenua, which are non-controversial. Obviously, the suggestion I'm making is a modification to the motion that's been moved and seconded, so there would need to be somebody to move this approach prior to voting on this.
Mr. Chairman. The mover and seconder can endorse that change without the need for an amendment if they're of a...
If you're prepared to amend your motion.
Mr. Chairman, I haven't spoken yet, but I'd just like to make 2 observations. I know we haven't had a resolution about the stream augmentation, but I think the meeting should record that there was no objection to that it be removed, and it's simply part of the deal. Secondly, the suggestion that the Section 32 be amended to add further explanation was also unanimously supported around this table. I think people should accept that and not have any discussion about it. With regard to the substance, I listened very carefully here, and I made one mistake, but I've been corrected. I think the voting is going to be 3 against and everybody else in favour. That's where this meeting sits. Tell me if I'm wrong, but that's where I see that. If that's the case, your resolution is unnecessary. It should be put as 1. If I've got that wrong, someone tell me and we'll do it. But I think we've got it right, so let's just get on with it.
Got it wrong.
Sorry?
Got it wrong. 4 votes.
I'm not voting against.
So Chair, with that...
3 people are going to vote against it.
So Chair, possibly one way of resolving that is prior to actually holding a vote, we could have an indicative show of hands of those who are intending.
Have a practice vote. Test the room. Test the room, James. I tell you what, I'll put your superannuation on it that I'm right.
I thought it was 4.
So James, are we suggesting that the 2 matters that Tangata Whenua requested be dealt with, those 2 minor matters, for once being removed? We're saying they don't need to be amended, but they will be done in good faith.
Exactly.
Amended?
Just make sure they're recorded in the minutes.
Yeah.
Yep, we can do that.
I deliberately spoke about them so it's recorded on the record. You can come back to it. I said it was agreed unanimous just to record it, so I put it there. So there's no argument about it. No one objected. Done.
So I suggest we put
So you're
the
putting
remainder to a
5B
vote.
back in.
Yeah, 5B back in.
5B back in
It was a single resolution.
if indeed you think...
James's salary, 1 year salary on the line is...
No, it's his superannuation.
Please call the question.
And Mr. Chairman, what are the 2 that we're speaking of, rather than numbers?
Oh no, the two other Tangata Whenua ones.
They're on Table A that Tanya tabled, and they're the second 2 bullet points.
It's the one about the taking out the stream enhancements going out. And secondly, to have extra language written into Section 32 which describes Tangata Whenua views. We know what they are, we'll all discuss them.
Good.
Agreed. No need to vote on it.
It's only the 19th.
Sorry?
But it's back in.
Yes.
Okay, we have a mover and a second. We've had 7 years of discussion. I am going to put the recommendation as they stand and as they are on the wall. All those in favour? We'd have to have show of hands, I guess. All those in favour?
I'll compromise on this one.
Can I hold that while I take a photo?
Against?
With both of us like this.
Against? Are you against?
No, I'm abstaining, Mr. Chairman,
Abstaining?
because I didn't get a clear enough answer. Just thrown on the table like that didn't suit me. Go to pie.
He's voting against.
One against.
Abstained again.
Who was the other one?
1 against and 1 abstention.
He was in favour. 1 against, 1 abstention.
The motion is passed. Well done, team. You did it well.
Mr. Chairman,
I'll give you my bank account for the super payments.
Mr. Chairman, I've got to go.
Okay.
And the company Karuna.
So Chair, we're about to lose 2 members.
Me?
Well, we haven't dealt with the next item, which is the process for notification.
I gave notice at the beginning I was leaving it.
Oh, shit.
We've still got quorum once we have 3 members go.
Yep.
So, Chair, I recommend that we just continue.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go, but I'd just like to thank everyone and say I'm not leaving town, so I'll see you around.
Next week.
See you. I'm Healan, thank you.
Can we have your passport?
So you guys are good on that?
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to, we need to quickly get to item 7, which is the options for notification. We've had a little bit of discussion on this.
Once Rick's gone, we're done.
We're done.
I told you, we can sort it in council next week.
Lost their quorum, haven't we? We're down to 13.
We lost our quorum.
I've got a plane, so I need to go at 4:30 latest.
We've lost quorum anyway.
Okay.
Okay, we've lost the quorum, so, and Tanya has to go 4:30, so I'm going to call the end of the meeting.
Can we to give a vote of thanks to everyone involved in this process from the stakeholders group who are here to witness this occasion. Thank you. everybody.
Thanks, Jenny.
Ngā mihi, Jenny.
There's a Waiata. Yeah, come on, Waiata.
So
You can close the meeting, mate.
1, 2, 3.
For those at the back, kia ora tātou. Thank you. You've heard me in the past mention a particular whakatauki, and there's a cordial that goes with that. Rick's already heard it if he wanted to depart. And it's about Tāwhiao, who sought audience of the monarchy in 1884. And when he went there, he sought audience of some of his kaumātua, one in particular, Oranga Whenua. Oranga Whenua said to him, son, he says, kia hore te marino, kia whakapapa pauna me te mōna kia tere te kāroto, hi kei mua i tō huarahi. Haere ko tō ho haere ko te rangi Māori e. May the car be widespread, may the waters ahead of you glisten like that of greenstone, may the shimmer of sun light up the pathways ahead of you, may your constant companion be peace and goodwill to all whom you encounter. The key part here in terms of where we've reached today was when Oranga Whenua said on the return to Tāwhiao, he said, son, how did it go? He said, the monarchy refused to meet me, but he says, ka haere Māori atu, ka hoki Māori mai. And what that means is that I went and I preserved the value and the essence of who I was, and when I came back, I was the same as when I left. I lost nothing in the interim. Hoi anō kia tau kia tātou katoa, te hata whai o tā tātou reki o Ukraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitangi te wairua tapu ake ake. Āmene, kia ora tātou.